And we're live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Thoughtful Faith live stream. I'm Jacob Hansen, the host of Thoughtful Faith. And I just wanted to, first of all, maybe apologize to some of you guys. Maybe you don't know. I've been dealing with a lot of sort of stuff going on personally. Nothing really, really bad, just some business complications that took up a lot of my time. Actually, one of them is a new venture that I'm been getting started up, and it is really kicking my butt, but it is going well so far. So thanks to everyone for your support with the new venture that I'm getting started. So anyway, enough about me. I wanted to talk about a very sad subject today, but I wanted to bring on with me my good friend, Luke Hansen. Whoop. Let's get both of us on here live. There we are.
Hey, Jacob. How's it going?
Hit the wrong button. How you doing, Luke?
Hard days, but doing okay.
Yeah. Obviously today we're going to be talking about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And so it's crazy. This all happened. I was working, totally swamped, and all of a sudden my phone just exploded. Probably other people have that exact same thing. I just was in a position where I genuinely couldn't do anything. I literally didn't even have time to like react or really think about it much because I had so many things I had to get done for our grand opening we were doing, and it required me literally to just be 100% focused on it. I literally got home last night at 11:45 at night, and I started work at like 8:30 in the morning. So I've been utterly exhausted, but the whole time I've been working, I've been thinking about this. I've been seeing the texts that are coming in. Have you just been blown away as me at the magnitude of the reaction to this?
If you had told me a week ago that something like this was going to happen, Charlie Kirk, you could probably put someone like Ben Shapiro in there as well, or JD Vance if they got shot. I would say that's bad, but I wouldn't have anticipated the reaction, not only to them in the internet world, but like to me personally. The amount that it hit me was surprising to me. I was actually just at a family friend's house. We were having dinner, and they had been on a cruise with no internet, so they found out today about it. And I was trying to explain to them what it was like in real time to have this happen, and I found myself unable to get through the story because I became so emotional. That just happened like an hour ago, so it's still sinking in, I think.
Yeah, I also and that was the reason I wanted to do this live stream tonight, despite my life being insane and me wanting to just like not do anything. I just felt like I needed to let people know kind of maybe where, and I have an audience here that like to know my thoughts on thing, I think. I hope. And so I wanted to do this because I have been somewhat in a state of shock, and it's just everyone has been. Like your reaction, I got a text from my aunt, was like, I've never cried over like someone that I don't know having something like this happen. And you know, I do think I have one reason why I think that is. It's sort of like we all kind of know Charlie, or knew Charlie, obviously. And it wasn't just that someone that we felt like we kind of knew was murdered. We literally watched it. I can't think of many instances, and not only watched it, like you could literally watch it in real time or like shortly thereafter, like moments after the fact. You look on your phone, it's like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And I think that added to the shock, because it was like, this is something that happens that we, it's in a distant land, someone you don't know. People get murdered all the time. But when it's someone that you feel like you kind of know, and then you were a witness to it, and it wasn't like, every murder or a lot of them will have people that were witnesses, but this is like the whole country just watched this. I think that just hits different.
And you didn't know if he was dead or not. Like, that's the part that got me telling the story today that I couldn't really get through, is just Glenn Beck went on air immediately because he was about to go on air anyways. Megyn Kelly was in the middle of recording when it happened, and Twitter, all the people hopping on like, pray for Charlie, people putting in their YouTube community posts. I even saw somebody like Cameron Bertuzzi capturing Christianity, others on there, while we were in this interim period of not knowing what happened.
Yeah.
And so everybody's there, everybody's waiting, everybody's praying, and then to just be hit with that announcement by President Trump, I think was the way that most people found out. It just, I sat in that chair right behind me and just couldn't do anything for about 30 minutes. It was brutal.
Yeah, I don't think your reaction was uncommon. And it isn't even, to me, this is one of the parts of this that's really been frustrating me, is that everyone wants to immediately go to sort of the political angles on it. And like my thing that I threw up a quick tweet was just my heartbreak that like, hey, there are two little kids who don't have a dad now. You know what I mean? Like that was the part, you know, you're a father, I am too. At the end of it, it's like we can dehumanize each other so badly. And that was what I thought about. I was like, I don't care about the political ramifications and is it the right that's to blame or the left that's to blame or any of that stuff. That's all fine. We'll have those discussions, but it's sort of like in my mind, especially for all of us out here, the very first thing needs to be is that, you know, his wife and kids just watched their dad get killed. And that is actually, it was funny. It was someone who's totally on the other side of the political aisle. I can't remember his name. He's the guy who like debated Ben Shapiro on, I think, in Jubilee and then kind of became famous. And there's this video going around and he's a really hard left kind of Democrat type. And he just broke down in tears and was like talking about, you know, the fact that his kids don't have a dad anymore. And that no child deserves that. And it was like this moment of like, yes, that's the proper reaction for all of us. And left, right, center, like when that kind of thing happens, when someone is murdered, not someone who's guilty that needs to be taken out because there's justifiable stuff, but an innocent person, like that is the reaction. And it's been really, really frustrating to see people immediately jump on political bandwagons. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree. Obviously, the reason why this is a story is because it has political implications, ramifications, but in order to conduct politics properly, it has to be a human thing. Like the reason that the Nazis and the communists under Stalin's regime are so bad was because the people were getting in the way of the politics. And the politics had to be carried out. The political agenda, the political ideology had to be carried out with a disregard to the people. And so, in a sense, this is political. Charlie was killed in the very political act that he became famous for doing, and that half the country loved him for and half the country hated him for. And that means something. It says something about the country. It's a call to reflection. But at the heart of it, like you said, there's a widow. There's two children without a father. There are many friends of Charlie that are grieving. The shooter, I'm sure their family's going through something unimaginable as well. And you have to keep that in mind if you're going to have an informed and proper political response to it, I think.
Agreed. And I think that actually that is something. I thought a lot about the shooter's family. You know, I saw those pictures of him with his mom, and she looks like any other LDS kind of mom in Utah. And his family and what they're going through. And it's just a horrible, horrible mess. With that in mind, some of the reactions that have come through, you know, obviously you have the people that are just monsters saying he had it coming and that kind of stuff. And I think basically everyone can condemn that. But you also have a group, I noticed almost immediately, there's almost like a group of people that want to use this as like a recruitment time of like, so like Nick Fuentes, for example, who I just find to be an absolute monster of a human being, in my opinion, immediately out there, like trying to fill Charlie's shoes and like, I'm kind of like there for Charlie. And you got Milo Yiannopoulos, like, oh yeah, well now see, you guys killed the nice guy. Like now I'm the alternative. And it's just like, you guys, you leeches, like the day of posting that kind of crap. It's just, again, the tribalism that, and I'm not going to say that there isn't tribalism that exists. And I want to talk a little bit about that. But it's like, can people have just a minute, just like a freaking minute, for us to recognize that, to just kind of grieve the loss of someone? And I do think, though, that most people, left and right, on whatever side of the political spectrum they tend to lean, that they that everyone has kind of been reflecting on, this is real. Like this just went to another level that we've all been bickering and fighting with each other for a while, but it's like, what just happened? And I feel like a lot of people, that's kind of where everyone's at. Is that how you feel?
I think so. And I do think it's starting to turn a little bit. Eventually you do have to come back to the real world. And
Yeah.
Tomorrow's probably going to be that day of,
Yeah.
now we need to battle things out. So hopefully it goes well.
Yeah. And that's sort of the thing, is what are the ways to react to this? Right. I think that there's going to be this is what bugs me. I don't mind the left-right framing if the left-right framing is about the ideologies of the left and the right, the ideas on the right and the left. Where I get really bothered is when it's about the people on the right or the left. You see, when you make the battle about people, then you fight with people. I'm not interested in fighting with people. I'm interested with battling ideas and having ideas battle each other. I think when Christ says to love your enemies, what he's teaching us is that even if you think that their ideas are abhorrent and wrong, we still love, it's sort of the love the sinner, hate the sin. And the reason Charlie is dead is because someone had heard enough of the rhetoric about a certain group of people that are the problem, and eventually said, well, we're going to do something about it. If people are the problem, then let's take out the people that are the problem. That is the historical norm for what people do when they think that people are the problem. And if you can't persuade the people, if you can't change their mind, well, what are you left with? Violence. That's what the Nazis did. That's what the communists did. That's what every totalitarian evil regime, that's what an evil jerk does it, in any situation. If he hits an abusive father, does that to his children. You know what I mean? It's like, so why, if we want to get away from things like what happened to Charlie, we need to actually go to what Charlie was doing. See, the crazy thing is that this is why everyone, I think, even people on the other side of the aisle, there's a unifying factor around him. And I have my disagreements with Charlie Kirk on things, but he understood fundamentally that the battlefield is the battlefield of ideas. And so he went out and battled ideas. And he was great at it. And he convinced a lot of people. He was trying to persuade people rather than using force and coercion. And he got killed for it. And so everyone is kind of stepping back going, holy crap. You got killed just because he was out trying to persuade people to a particular point of view?
And then there's another holy crap that gets added on top of that and a lot of people don't seem to have that big of a problem with it. And this is the thing, I was surprised by, I tweeted out this story and it has taken off. It's become massive. I think partly because it speaks to what's happening. My wife went to a paint night, a ladies' night, and somebody there was coming back from their shift of being a nurse, and she was speaking with 3 other young nurses. This was just on Friday night that this happened. So our Friday night shift, speaking with 3 other young nurses, and they said, yeah, he kind of had it coming to him. 3, respectable career, high-powered career, not an internet slob. You're not eating Doritos on your couch all day long type of people that we like to think about. Just living their life here in San Antonio, Texas, the edge of the Bible Belt. church parking lots are full on Sunday. And they felt comfortable saying that in the workplace, in the professional environment. And this lady just came to the ladies' night that Joy was at, shaken, like just visibly affected by it, and didn't want to talk about it because she didn't know who else, would have the opinion of the nurses. So she kind of waited until it was only a small group, including my wife, that she kind of felt more comfortable around sharing it with. And then Joy comes home shaken, having a hard time believing what's going on. And then she tells me, and it kind of hits you again. It's been 48 hours. You see what's going around on the internet, but then to hear, no, like 15 minutes down the road, there are real actual life people that would seem like respectable citizens of the US if you pass them on the street that think these things about you. I mean, like if you get big enough, Jacob, you're getting big. If I get big enough, if we keep this up, I'm not trying to compare us to Charlie Kirk. He was a once in a generation kind of political figure, but if you get big enough, they'll say the same thing about you. If something happens to you like this, they'll say it about me, and they're walking around.
I've wondered too, what do you think? How do you think people get to that point?
I think it's part of the dehumanizing thing that you said. It's this words are violence thing that people have been talking about. I've noticed 3 things that people have brought up, apart from the false thing that Stephen King was spreading around that Charlie said. They get really irked that he talks about the affirmative action policies and they interpret that as racism. They get really irked about his pro-life positions, and then also about his comments about the cons of the Second Amendment not outweighing the pros. And for some reason, those 3 things seem to be the things that they go to say kind of he had it coming to him. Something about those things.
It's so absurd to me. Like, if I were to think that it is justifiable to murder people who hold abhorrent views, I'd be a mass murderer, because the amount of people in this world who hold absolutely insane, backwards ideas is nuts. The whole point of our institutions of Western society that we've built, especially here in the United States, is that the only time we can be justified in using violence is in the defense of human rights. And there's this absurd notion, like you're saying, that words are violence. When you start telling people that words are violence, you know what is a justified response to violence? Violence.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely absurd. Words are not violence. I tweeted that out the other day. Words are not violence. Violence is violence. We just saw violence. Okay. We just, like, everyone wake the freak up. If you think somebody saying something that you think is offensive is the same as what we all witnessed earlier this week with our own eyes, you are nuts. And that is the problem.
I think it's part of it's the banality of evil. You have these people out here that are cheering in their cars on the way to church, way to work, cheering that Charlie Kirk was murdered. And that's scary. That's disturbing. But what's even more insidious and uncanny is the people like those nurses, that they're not cheering for it. They're not crazy blue-haired wackos on Blue Sky yelling about it all the time. They're just people that go about their normal lives and hold these opinions of, like, yeah, kind of had it coming to them. And it reminds me of the court reporter, I believe it was in the Nuremberg trials, going through what the Nazis did. And it kind of struck them the banality of evil, how for some people, the Holocaust was not a horrific act of evil or even an act of malice on their part. It was a day job. The Holocaust was a day job for people.
Yeah.
And then they came home and had dinner with their families after it. So people can get in that mindset. I'm not saying that we're there yet, and I really hope we're not. I think we're at a turning point and the country decides what happens from here. If this is going to turn us back to God or send us down the path further, and it's just the beginning, if it's the canary in the coal mine. But you had that kind of evil is the more unsettling, the more disturbing type.
Well,
the type that's banal.
I think it's somewhat prophetic that President Nelson is published in Time magazine saying exactly like the opposite of what that killer had in their mind. The exact opposite ideology. The ideology that says every human being is a child of God with dignity and worth, regardless of their ass backward opinions. Okay. And I'm saying that, and I don't think many of Charlie's opinions were crazy at all. I think he had a lot of common sense. But the people that do, and the people that I know that do, like, this is not. Let's do this real quick. Let's go to a few super chats here. I got some that came in. Want to address some of those so I don't get too far behind on this. So let's go first. Jacob Mayberry. Jacob, how's it going, man? He said one of the last things Charlie did before he died was praise Latter-day Saints. I thought that was cool.
And unfortunately, we're going to get to that later.
And so, yeah, we'll talk a little bit about some of the other reactions, considering that the killer was also at least raised a Latter-day Saint. Obviously fell off that wagon. But I wanted to say one thing. Apparently, I'm not sure if this is true. Somebody said that the first question he was asked was like a religious one. And I don't know if this is true. Someone can confirm. Someone mentioned this to me, that he was asked about the Book of Mormon and its evidence compared to the Bible. And like, that there's more evidence for the Book of Mormon. Like, someone apparently, it may have been someone who had watched my debate who had asked that question. You can look it up. But anyway, he was more than gracious with us Latter-day Saints. And coming from an evangelical Christian, that means a lot. When someone is out there saying that he wants a strong Mormon church with its mojo back, I'm like, heck yeah, man, that's what I want too.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. Logan Crandall just finished Sunday dinner. What I miss? Well, I hope you've caught up by now a little bit. He said that a little earlier. So just talking about obviously the aftermath of everything with Charlie Kirk. Let's go with Austin Falter. Austin, buddy. At Huntington Beach, California for a family vacation. Walking by the pier, we see a vigil for Charlie. And thanks for having these conversations. Need more Jesus. That's cool. I think, honestly, again, the percentage of people that are this far down the ideological rabbit holes, I think that it's still fairly small. I don't think it's as big as, I think this is, as you said, it's a moment for reflection. I think everyone is sort of going, what does this mean? And I think that's a good thing, because I think a lot of these ideological movements have gotten so heated and divisive. And this kind of is like, hey, maybe we've crossed into a new territory that all of us recognize, just like, we don't like this. We need to go back. Any other thoughts on that?
No, other than to also say that I just think all these vigils are beautiful, and I've cried enough over the past 4 days, but it's still beautiful to see it every time. The Cougar Chronicle did one. That's at awesome. Memorial Park, 1,500 or so people in attendance. Just really beautiful to see. Absolutely. I would not have been able to get through them singing "God Be With You Till We Meet Again" at the end of that vigil. So, oh,
that's a big one. All right. All right. Ward Radio showing up. We need to bring back can you say it, Luke?
Ostracization.
There we are.
I kind of got it.
And we need to unlearn codependency. We are all afraid to state the obvious for fear of offending a liberal family member in the short term, which embodies the violence in the long term. So if Cardin wants to lecture me on not wanting to offend liberal family members, boy, I got some stories to tell you. I actually think that there is a time for mourning, a time for focusing on maybe the other aspects of this. But I agree with you, Luke, and I agree with Cardin to a certain extent. Eventually, we do have to have the conversation of what specific ideologies are the ones that contribute to this. The reason that guy pulled the trigger is because there are stories he's been telling himself in his head about the nature of the world that are not true. Okay? In his mind, it was justified to do what he did. How did he learn to think that such a thing was justifiable? And Cardin is 100% right. It is not this equal, all sides kind of, this and that. No, there are certain ideological forces out there, and I don't want to put it on sides. Here are the sides that matter to me. And we've kind of in our Ward Radio text group have been sort of texting about some of this stuff. But basically that left-right, in my opinion, is just such a stupid framing if you're framing it in terms of people. And in fact, left and right varies depending on if you're talking about European left and right. Are you talking about, I hate that entire framing. What matters to me as a Christian is true and false, right and wrong. And I look at every specific ideology out there and I say, is it true? Does it align with Christ? The scriptures teach us to do as much. Okay. And I can tell you right now that the ideology that is colloquially known as leftism or wokeism is riddled with an insane amount of ideas that are simply false and contrary to the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's why I tend to tell people that I consider myself more conservative, because I think that the conservative sort of ideology, at least the classically liberal one, of the conservatives in America, just so you all know, as we're kind of politicizing this and using political language to describe it, in the United States, to be right-wing or conservative means that you are conserving the principles of a classically liberal revolution. The classical liberals of John Locke and all of that stuff, that is the sort of ideology that undergirded the American founding, that our scriptures literally say was inspired of God. Okay? So from a Latter-day Saint perspective, we are trying to conserve the principles that this country was built on. Okay? That's the basic conservative ideology of a right-winger, right? And so, no, I do not hold that all political parties are created equal. That's insane. But what I don't do is lump people into their political parties. What I do is look at the specific ideologies, and then I say, are these ideologies in alignment with Christ or are they not? And that's what I care about. Now, political action requires political tribes to actually get the vote out, to get enough people into a group or a tribe or a political party, they're all the same thing, in order to vote a certain way for a certain candidate or certain policy. It requires you to make alliances with people that you disagree with on all sorts of issues, but you agree with enough things to actually get together to form a voting bloc to actually make something happen. And which side, quote unquote, in our two-party system, you got all the political science about all this stuff, why there's two parties and all that. You got two parties in the group, two divisions in the country that naturally form because of the way things are structured in our electoral system. And then you have to end up deciding which one of those two is moving things more in the right direction or not. And so when this whole thing gets framed as this political battle, I just hate it, because I'm not the politics isn't where the problem is. Getting the right politician into office, it's a good thing. It's important, but it's not the main thing. Politics, as Andrew Breitbart said, is downstream from culture. You want to know where culture's down from? It's downstream from your belief systems, your ideologies. So the real root of all this is the stories people tell themselves about the nature of this world. And the stories that you've been told, Luke, have led you down a certain path in your life. Certain stories that you've heard, that you believe, and that you have placed your faith in, and that you base your life on. And that shooter had a whole bunch of different stories that are totally different than yours. Totally different narratives about the nature of the world. And that twist of narratives came something that justified him in pulling a trigger against a father and husband. That, in my mind, is what we need to talk about. What are the ideas behind this? And ideas like one that we brought up just a moment ago, that words are violence, insane. The notion that the world is a complex system of power dynamics and everything everyone does is just about power and privilege, and that there is no God, there is no ultimate morality, standard of morality. There's just power and preference anyway. Well, guess what? If there's only power and preference and it's effective to shoot him, the only argument you could make from sort of a secular, hard, atheistic perspective, and people will be mad at me for saying this, but if you want to follow it to its logical conclusion, the only thing that holds a person back is that it isn't strategically advantageous to their cause.
Yep.
Because if it actually helped their cause in the end, well, then why not squeeze the trigger? unless you actually hold to an idea that human life is somehow inherently valuable. That's a narrative people tell themselves. That's, as Noah Harari would say, it's a myth that we all believe. But the thing is, we actually believe these myths are true. We believe that these aren't just myths. They describe the fundamental nature of individual human hearts and what our destiny is as mankind and what it means to be a human being. Like, people are like, oh, you remember this is a human being. Who gives a crap if it's a human being, if human beings are just a cosmic accident anyway? And like, those who are just hard atheists, secular, like, what do you even say to that? You don't have anything for it. So when people lose faith in something bigger, in a standard bigger than you, and then they're told that nothing in the world, that the world is nothing but power dynamics, and that words are violence, and then we wonder why this happened. And let's not pretend we don't know what group of people in our university system are the ones talking about this. There are entire departments of universities dedicated to spreading those very ideas that we just talked about. This kid was a normal kid in Utah. Maybe he was weird or had his own little proclivities, but you put a person that's a little weird with some proclivities into some environment like that, being ideologically indoctrinated while they're embracing all their hedonistic whims, while their professors are cheering them on. And then you're expecting those people to come out of that system half normal? You guys wonder why your kids are all going to college and coming out total psychopaths? It's because they're being indoctrinated. And Charlie was one of the ones who was trying to fight back against that. Bring back some basic common sense. Sorry if I've been on a bit of a rant, but obviously, in my mind, the real evil, the real danger isn't even those professors. It's the fact that anyone allows these false ideologies to continue to spread unchallenged. The fact that we don't have social taboos against reprehensible ideologies. And once we become less tolerant of those kinds of ideologies and speak out, and when I say less tolerant, I'm not talking about violence, people. I'm talking about using words and persuasion. Charlie was doing that. I'm trying to do that. Luke, you're trying to do that. That's what we're in the work of. And that's what we should all be doing. And so, anyway, I could rant on and on, but I'm gonna give you your thoughts on that. I'm gonna take a breath.
I have many thoughts that I might bring up later on. One of them that I think is one of these incorrect narratives that people tell that is at the heart of this event and the political moment that we're at right now is an external versus internal locus of control. If the problems in your life, if the solutions to the problems in your life are internal within you, if you have the power through your own agency to make of your life what you will, if you can have peace with yourself and with the world because of you, or if everything's external, if I'm not going to be happy, my group, my clan, my oppressed class is not going to be happy unless the government does X, Y, or Z, or unless the culture recognizes or accepts X, Y, or Z, outlaws speech about X, Y, or Z, all that kind of stuff. And to an extent, it happens on both sides. I think because some people out there are reacting to the shooting in kind of a, oh my gosh, like, it's wrong. I knew it was this bad. Some people on some of the tweets I put out is like, you naive person, you didn't know how bad it was. It's so bad. It's terrible. Everything's going to heck. And yes, to an extent. And that's why I think the gospel gives you, maybe you would call it like an integrated locus of control or an internal locus of control with a safety net. Because it is true that despite your best efforts, things can just go wrong sometimes. In Charlie's case, if there was no guiding, overarching God or reason for being out there, despite Charlie doing everything right, and by all accounts, he did everything right in his life, it still ended badly for him. Yeah. But if you, I think you can maintain an internal locus of control a lot better with a belief in a higher power, especially the Christian narrative, and especially the Latter-day Saint version of the Christian narrative puts everything into perspective. There was, I might call it a tender mercy, actually, that before I learned about the shooting, immediately before, I had received an email out of the blue from Ward Radio, that this doesn't really happen, of a guy saying, I have questions about the church. I'm investigating a number of different churches. I have questions. Would someone from Ward Radio like to hop on a call with me? And so I was on a call with this complete stranger, this guy I'd never met before. We talked for quite some time Wednesday afternoon. And at the end of the call, I explained to him why I believe, and also the plan of salvation, how the Latter-day Saints conceptualize our life on earth, the role we have in it, the role Jesus Christ has in it, the telos of what we're doing here, the reason, the purpose. And I felt the Spirit like testify, as it does sometimes, when I was explaining that to him. And then I get off the phone, and I get off the Zoom call, and then see that my phone's blown up. My dad's called 2 times, and to see Charlie getting killed, snuffed out almost instantly, at almost the exact same moment I was testifying of the plan of salvation.
Wow.
and having that spiritual experience was like, that's the plan in action. And for people who know that truth, for people that have that grounding, it's shocking. You have to sit in the chair for 30 minutes and not do anything, and just absorb the awfulness and the shock of it. But you can go on, because you know that that's not the end of the story. You know the reason for these things, and the purpose behind them, even if you don't understand everything. And you can keep going like that. If you have a narrative of, woe is me, I'm oppressed, the government has, and therefore I'm in danger, things are out of control, you have to get violent. I mean, to some extent, you can't blame them once they've adopted certain ideologies.
That's a perfect segue into this point that I really wanted to hit home. And that is, everyone is out there like, oh, the world's so bad. Oh, there's all these problems. Okay, so what? What are you going to do about it? Well, here's the funny thing about this. There really are only 2 options. You have 2 ways to make an influence in the world of human beings and in society: persuasion or coercion. You can get people to voluntarily use their agency to make a choice, to choose a different way of thinking or living or whatever, or you can use coercion. You can force people to. And the ultimate expression of force is a bullet. Okay? And so when I look at the way to divide the groups, and as you've said, on both sides, there are those who would use force, and then there are those who would use persuasion. I may disagree with people on the other side of the aisle, but I always have respect for the ones that say, look, ultimately, I want to use persuasion. One of the challenges with the leftist ideology of the left is they want to use the state to do things. And the state is not a tool of persuasion. The state, I always tell people, the state, the government, makes laws. They don't make suggestions. In other words, when you're using the government, you're actually using the tool of coercion. The classical liberal idea was that the only justified use of violent force and coercion was the protection of rights, right? So, and specifically, rights that came ultimately from our Creator, from these moral entitlements that people have. And the idea is that we only have those 2 realms to operate in. And if you're on the side that is always wanting to use coercion instead of persuasion, I think it's really important to remember, when our missionaries go out, what is their purpose? To invite others to come unto Christ. In other words, to invite them, to try and persuade them. We all know the scripture, power and influence of the priesthood isn't maintained. Our spiritual power comes from our ability to persuade people, not to coerce people. Okay? And the ultimate form of coercion is violence. And so any side, when I'm looking at what are you looking to do and how are you looking to do it, I'm looking at, are you looking to use violence to get your way, or are you trying to use persuasion? Anyone who wants to use violence other than in the defense of human rights, justifiable human rights, not your right to not be offended, but actual things like your right to life, liberty, and property, If you're using the state for anything other than that, you're unjustified, in my opinion. That's the basis of my entire political philosophy. Because once you recognize that coercion and violence is what the state does, your natural inclination is to say, I don't like coercion and violence. And guess what, everybody? We just witnessed what coercion and violence looks like. It's why I'm so passionately anti-violence and anti-force anyway. I just want to persuade people to live in harmony with one another. And the way that we do that, so far as I can, as I can see, the best way to do that is through the gospel of Jesus Christ that's been restored to the earth. And so I just think that there's too much of this stupid tribalism that doesn't deal with the actual ideas in the specific. And then within either of those political camps or sort of sides, you have fractional elements that don't really seem to have a problem with violence. They're not trying to persuade people. They want to use the power of coercion if they can get it. And that to me is, studying history, that is the endless cycle of tyranny that just plays out over and over. Any other thoughts before we get to super chat? Sorry, I've been going my rants.
Well, I mean, this is why you do a video about it. Yeah, I think we could go to super chats.
Let's do it. All right. Logan Crandall says they don't kill you because you aren't. They don't kill you because you are not C. They call you a Nazi. They call you
the same time you did.
a Nazi so they can kill you. I think there's some truth to that. I think when the terminology that when you call people Nazis, you're basically you're putting them in the same. You're giving them a label that says that they are on the same par with people that we sent thousands of our young men to kill. So, yeah, unless you're an actual Nazi, if someone is calling you a Nazi, they're a part of the problem. But remember, I don't want to make this about them. That person has embraced ideas about the world that they were taught probably through the university and school systems that has taught them to think in those terms. They're so confused about what a Nazi even is. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, just so everyone knows here, go study a little bit of history. Go read the platform of the Nazi Party in 1928, when they first formed the party. Go look at their party platform and tell me how many of those align with the American conservative movement today. Okay, the reality is National Socialists, the Nazi Party, were a break-off group because they were all part of the same Marxist group. But the problem is the Marxists wanted to be international socialists, and the Nazis said, nah, that's stupid. We want to focus on a nationalistic version of socialism. So they're both cousins from the same Marxist cancer that got into this world a long time ago. So, and yes, it's a label. And none of these people understand that. They call you a Nazi so they can dehumanize you because you're a bad person. And again, they don't care about your ideas. They just care about, like, they want to dehumanize you, and it contributes to the problem. Any other thoughts on it, Luke, before we go to the next one?
No, I think that's right.
Cool. All righty, Ward Radio again, probably Carden. Matthew Watkins said it perfectly. There's a difference between calling for someone's murder and celebrating their murder. What do you think about that, Luke?
I'm actually... Oh, there's little difference. I thought you said,
there's little
difference. There's a difference.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's little difference between calling for
yeah.
murder.
Then that's true. And Matthew Watkins is great. If you're on X, I'm not saying if you're not on X, get on X. But if you do happen to be on X and you're not following Matthew Watkins, get off the stream, go follow him, and then come back.
All right, here we go. Next one from BIU. You can't 100% separate ideologies from people. Half of the members of an ideology are okay with political assassination, then that needs to be acknowledged. Ideologies are ultimately made up of people. I couldn't disagree more. In this sense, I think, well, there is a certain part of it that's true. The truth in this is that it's true that people are the ones who embrace ideologies. But remember that that same person can be redeemed when they drop that ideology And you know what we call for in the church when we go out to the world? For people to repent, to change. We're in the business of trying to help people to disabuse themselves of these kinds of false ideologies and embrace the gospel of Jesus Christ. We want to change people, as Rataff Benson said, from the inside out. Solzhenitsyn, I think it was Solzhenitsyn, who said that the problem runs through the middle of every human heart. Like, yes, exactly. And guess what we're all about? We're all about human hearts, changing them, preaching the gospel to them, persuading them to adapt a totally different narrative about the nature of this world. And you know what happens when people do that? Incredibly beautiful things happen. That's why I have a testimony of the gospel more than anything else. I haven't seen angels. I haven't had God appear to me. But I've watched as people have, as I use this pill analogy, it's like they all take this pill and it makes everything better. And then they say, where'd you get this pill? And they say, well, an angel gave it to me. Well, I say, this guy gave it to me, and that guy gave it to me. And they go all the way back, and there's some guy who's like, well, an angel gave it to me. And I start going, holy crap. I think an angel might have actually given it to this guy. Because I really do think that's the case. That's why I placed my faith in that narrative, because ultimately it is the way to live our lives. And it is the opposite of these ideologies that bring all this death and suffering and misery and hell into the world. And so, yes, to go back to the super chat here, ideologies, people have ideologies, but you have to separate the people from their ideologies. Because what do you do if you can't? What's your alternative? What's next? I'm going to tell you right now, if I have someone who I know that I cannot get rid of their ideology, and there's enough of them, and that ideology is ultimately going to cause me harm, guess what my solution is? And it would be a justified solution. It'd be violence. So if I literally, what do you want? You got two options, everybody. We can either have a battlefield in the realm of ideas, or we can have a battlefield like the one that we saw last week. What do you want? Do you want Charlie Kirk debating, or do you want Charlie Kirk dead? I'm the one here screaming from the top of the rooftops saying, let's have battles in the realm of ideas. That's how we win this. That's how we react to it. That's what Charlie was doing himself. And so when the people who don't recognize that, well, then what is the other solution then? And it really, I don't see any other one except for violence. And it'll either be violence that you commit yourself, or it'll be violence that you get your agents in the government to perpetuate on other people through the force of law. To say, I'm going to make you behave. And then you know what? It becomes a really dangerous battlefield, because at that point, the government is just a gun and we're all fighting over it to see who we get appointed at. And you break down all the social fabric. This is exactly what the founders said. Look, if our people can't control themselves, they'll just take over this government. As Adam said, it's like without morality, essentially, it'll be like, our Constitution will be like, it'll be like a whale falling through a net. They'll just rip it apart. Constitution won't matter for crap. Because this Constitution is only meant for people that have some level of self-control in governments. That's the great American experiment. Are we as a people, can we handle liberty? Can we actually give people liberty? Will they choose virtue with their liberty? Or will it descend into chaos, anarchy, and tyranny? Do you want to fight in the world of ideas, or do you want to get bloody? I'm not willing to give up on on what we've started here. And I believe that if we as a people can get right with God, and if we have enough motivated people like Charlie who are willing to go out there and try and fight in this battlefield of ideas, that we will move the needle in the right direction. Luke, you got to stop me.
I agree.
You disagree?
And then I also disagree at the same time, in the sense that you do have to fight the people that hold the ideologies.
How?
Like, well, at the judgment day, ideologies are not going to, oh, this is the celestial ideology, this is the telestial. People are going to get sent to the celestial, telestial, terrestrial, and outer darkness. And so there are consequences and reactions that you receive from God and from other people to the ideologies you have. Let me put it to you this way, Jacob. If somebody got on Blue Sky, TikTok, X to celebrate and cheer the death of Charlie Kirk, should they lose their job for that? Cheering for it, excited.
I could see that being justified. I can. I mean, it would depend on the specifics of the situation.
I think that's what this person was talking about with their super chat.
Well, and ultimately, I don't necessarily have, but that isn't an act of violence, in my opinion. That is an act of, look, you no longer fit in our company. Our company has a certain ethos of basic respect for human life, and you can't work with us in a voluntary system of exchange. You don't have any obligation to be in this company if that's the case. And I actually believe that can be a very legitimate, justifiable social taboo, right? Like, does your boss have a right to fire you if you and you're in a American flag making company and you're an avowed Marxist who wants to like destroy America? Like, yeah, they could be like, you don't fit in our company culture anymore. We're going to have to let you go because we have a certain image we want to maintain, but that's within a free system. So I don't have a problem with people, freely associating with who they want to associate with. I'm a big believer in that. But I would say that, and so I would say that letting people go from their jobs would fit within my, within the realm of a free exchange. And people say, oh, well, that's cancel culture. I'm like, I kind of don't like these sort of catchphrases. Like, I think they're super unsophisticated because I'm all for canceling bad ideas.
You have to understand what the purpose of a bumper sticker slogan is, and you can't read too far into it. Cancel culture refers to a very specific practice, not any time somebody has consequences for expressing an opinion.
Yeah, and if you express an opinion that goes contrary to the values of the company that you're a part of, that's fine. I don't care. My thing is this: is like, what are the values? Who's right, who's wrong here when it comes to the moral idea and ideology? If a person holds an abhorrent ideology, I don't have any problem with having consequences for that. However, I'm very mindful that like my first instinct wouldn't be to fire them. It'd be to have a conversation with them. It would be to try and help persuade that person to change their mind, to preach the gospel to them, to invite them to change, to sit down and have a conversation, right? Now, I agree. I think at some point, like if it's hurting your business because you have some nut, like, the church itself even will allow for a wild degree of crazy ideas within the church to be held before we let people go. So while it can be justified, I think it's complicated. I think just like with the church, it's like excommunication. I don't excommunicate someone because they have some really stupid ideas. We have them in the church and we try and change their mind. And that's the right approach. I think that approach should apply more generally. Again, but no, I do agree though that it can be justified to take certain actions.
That's what I think. That me reading that, I think, is what the super chat was trying to get at, is that the people do have to be addressed in a certain way. There has to be consequence, not killing them, of course, but there has to be social, political consequences to these ideologies.
Well, and a lot of people don't realize this. Social taboos are literally the like currency of a society. Yep. The reason I don't walk down the street naked is because it's socially taboo. The reason that I don't do about 1 billion other things is because there's a social order that we negotiate through our own interactions. And so, yeah, I think it's okay to have a taboo against celebrating the murder of an innocent father and husband. Like that shouldn't be. And if that taboo includes like, sorry, it's going to be really hard for you to find a job if you're out there championing the murder of innocent fathers. Like I don't have a problem with that. Where I do have a problem is where like Ben Shapiro or somebody goes to some college campus and he just like wants to talk about classical liberalism. And you have a bunch of people who show up are like, this is violence because you think that men are actually men and they can't be women just by saying they are. It's like, what? Again, the issue, let's get down to the specific. The problem is that those people are just totally wrong. And they don't even want to have a conversation about it. So anyway, Let's continue. We got a ton of super chats. Ward Radio, either way, you're condoning or encouraging an assassin. It's just a question of either whether you encourage the assassin before or after the fact. This is the people who cheer on murder. I agree. I think
Pretty
that's a
much.
fair assessment.
Yep.
If you're cheering on a murder after the fact, you're just as good as encouraging it before. Agreed. The Haystack says, I listened to Erica Kirk live and it started raining. It made me think of Moses 7 when Enoch witnessed God weep and why he wept. We have a new flood coming. I don't know about the flood coming, but definitely a sad moment. And her courage has been admirable. I actually thought about this. I'm in the public eye. I've gone on public events. I like to do those kind of things. And there's sort of a, hey, somebody just got shot at one of those. And I've even thought about this, and everyone who's ever been in this sort of realm has been sort of like, hey, especially when you go through your comment section and you start looking at some of the unhinged nut jobs that are in your comment section hating on you, you start going, and I even have this, like, something like, I now have a large number of people who hate my guts, like really hate my guts. And if one of them snap, could something like this happen to me? And honestly, my thought has just been like, I went to that temple and I made a covenant that I was willing to give my life for the kingdom of God. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to heck no. I think it was Ben Shapiro who said he's going to pick up the bloody mic and he's just going to go around colleges doing exactly what Charlie did. And frankly, I think that is a heroic response. And I think it's the exact right response that every one of us should do. We should double down. We should have more debates, more discussions, more public events. Just to give, and pardon my crassness, but to give the big middle finger to that guy who did this, to say, you're not scaring us. You're not going to stop us. The free speech movement, what Charlie was doing, and I'm not talking from the political perspective, I'm talking about from the idea of free speech as a concept to avoid violence. We are believers in that, and we are willing to lay down our lives for that kind of thing. So no, I'm not afraid. I mean, I am afraid, but I don't care.
I'm not afraid for me.
Yeah.
Charlie, on Wednesday, Charlie didn't actually have a bad thing happen to him, in a sense. To take it that life of another person is evil, but from Charlie's perspective, he was doing the thing that he loved, standing up for America, talking about how much he loves Mormons, and then he was in the spirit world. And the glory that place has. You can't scare me by threatening me with that. That sounds like an okay way to go. The only thing that gives you pause in that moment is having a wife and kids.
Yep.
And what that will do to them, because that will be very hard for them.
Yep.
And you have to take that into consideration. We both have to take that into consideration. But other than that, for me personally, you think you're going to threaten me with getting shot? It's fine. You have to go out one way or another. And it's nice on the other side.
I told people I want to go out one of two ways. I either want to go out when I'm old and surrounded by a posterity and just, in all of their love and embrace, or in a blaze of glory in the last stand of America with two guns in my hand and a charge coming and there's no hope to make it, but we're going to do it anyway. Right. So one way or another, I agree. I actually don't fear that kind of stuff. Like you said, for myself personally. Also, I keep in mind, I'm a small potato compared to other people out there, but there's, you go into the comment section of some of our things and it only takes one total psychopath to do something. But yeah, it's not like a legitimate, I'm not terrified everywhere I go or something, by any stretch of the imagination, but it's always kind of in the back of your mind. And it is something that to all of us, anyone who's out there in this, hey, let's all of us join together and just say, no, we're going to do this more. I'm more motivated than ever to get out and be a voice. So, all right, let me see here. Not a lecture speaking about membership at large. What was that one in reference to? You remember?
No.
We're a little behind on that. Thanks for the super chat, Carden.
Thank you, Carden.
All right. Alan blogged it. Maybe getting to this, but I feel like the thing that pains me most about Charlie's assassination is that it took place in my backyard of Utah. It feels like part of Utah's innocence was stolen.
Yes.
What do you think about that, Luke?
I noticed, and I made this observation in the video I did on this in Doctrine and Governance, that the day after Charlie's assassination was September 11th. And on September 11th, America watched as 3,000 people were killed by a foreign terrorist. And when Charlie's death, 3,000 people witnessed the death, the murder, cold-blooded murder of somebody exercising their First Amendment rights. So there's a parallel there, and I think the way that innocence was lost at 9/11, there's a whole generation. I'm one of the last people. I was a few months after my 5th birthday on 9/11. I have scraps. It impacts me on a personal level because I experienced it, but only like 20%. Everybody before me, everybody 26 and under, I'm not 26, but in case people have really good memories, everybody 26 and under has not had something like this, at least on a global. People in their personal lives go through all sorts of things, but on like a countrywide level, it almost happened in Butler, and thank God it didn't, but now it did, and it happened, and this is their 9/11, and especially like we know people in Utah. The Cougar Chronicle they were one of the people saying, oh, we should ask Charlie about the Book of Mormon evidences and stuff. You know, people we know had siblings there, had friends there.
Yeah.
Front row seats, 15 feet away, 30 feet away, middle of the crowd.
Yeah, it was. It definitely hit close to home for Latter-day Saints, and actually that's a good segue into kind of the Latter-day Saint angle on this. Obviously, it happens in Utah, and the shooter was an ex-Mormon, essentially, who had embraced, from all we can tell, radical ideologies. Most likely learned through the university system. There's some things we don't know yet, so I want to be kind of careful a little bit on this, that we don't give out false information. But then you have people who react to it as some way of like trying to own Mormons. One of them, the most reprehensible one I saw just this morning, was, let me pull this up here on the screen real quick. Nope, not Jim Bennett. It's Pastor Mark
slip.
Yep, Pastor Mark Driscoll. He said the assassin was a Mormon. This is not the same as Christianity. It is a demonic cult. Mormonism's Jesus is no closer to the Christ of the Bible than Islam's Jesus is. Well, I was a little fired up about that because Mark Driscoll, like, to just, that's despicable.
He is standing on, Charlie Kirk was praising Mormons. He was saying we need to get our mojo back. He's saying half my team is Mormon minutes before. And then alleged Pastor Mark Driscoll stands on the grave of Charlie Kirk to smear and slander falsely. The kid was not Mormon at the time. The people that Charlie Kirk was expressing his love for right before he died is asinine. It is despicable.
So,
and the amount of popularity that his tweet has just twists the knife. It's disgusting.
So I decided that I would pull a Charlie Kirk, and in Charlie Kirk's honor, I decided to do something very Charlie Kirk-esque. And I said, correction, ex-Mormon. He literally abandoned the faith and was living with a trans lover. So Pastor Mark, will you take down this post and issue a correction? If not, in honor of Charlie Kirk, I would like to publicly challenge you to a public debate. I can host it on my channel or any larger channel that wishes to host. The subject is Mormonism a demonic cult? 15-minute opening statements, rebuttals, cross-examination, all the standard stuff. He'd go first in each round because he's making the positive claim and say, are you willing to publicly defend your public declarations? Are you as courageous as Charlie was? Pastor Mark, I await your response. And I'm still awaiting your response, Pastor Mark, and I would very much like to hear from you. I would be happy to debate that subject with you civilly and in person. Please reach out to me. You can DM me through X, or through my website, thoughtfulfaith.org. So awaiting that one. Another Latter-day Saint angle, something that's coming up. So a lot of people may not know this. Angel Studios has a video that they were planning to release here in October that I think now is more sort of appropriate than ever. They're releasing a video about Helmuth Hubner. Do you know who that is by chance, Lou?
Yeah, he's a 17-year-old kid, 15-year-old kid. I forget.
He was
Yeah,
17.
he realized who the Nazis were and what they were doing, and he somehow had access, a radio or something like that, to information that most of the general public was not privy to, and he was printing this in like anti-Nazi tracts. And I believe he was the first citizen execution in the Nazi party.
I think he was the youngest, I want to say.
The youngest. Okay, the youngest.
He was the youngest. I believe he was a Latter-day Saint too. So here you have this young Latter-day Saint teenager who is looking around at his society and seeing essentially that they're lying. We're talking about ideas, ideologies. And so what does he do? He decides that he's going to use speech and persuasion to push back against people that are using violence and coercion. And they're lying to people to justify their violence and coercion, which is what you do to justify violence and coercion. You lie. And he begins to distribute leaflets because, yes, he got a radio, I forget what kind of and he's able to listen to the BBC broadcasts, which were illegal in Nazi Germany. And so what does he do? Him and a few of his friends start kind of like realizing this, these young sort of activist types. But what are they committed to? These aren't activists who are using violence and burning down buildings and stuff. They just start printing tracts. Back in the day, by the way, that's the equivalent of like social media, you guys. The equivalent of what we have as social media today were like pamphlets and small tract kind of publications that would distribute things out to people. And that was kind of like your social media feed in the 40s or 30s and before that, right? And so it's also interesting to see, by the way, random side note, the church in its early days was very big on printing like pamphlets and leaflets, and like having a printing press was a major thing. That was like, remember you guys, that's like having their Instagram page. That was like having their YouTube channel, right? Like we today are the modern equivalent of like the early church members who were like making all these pamphlets in their printing press. That's why it was a big deal when the printing press was destroyed. Again, violence and coercion stopping free speech. Okay. So, back to Helmuth Hubner. So he distributes these pamphlets. The Gestapo finds out. And the understanding is that he ended up taking more credit for stuff that was out there so that his friends wouldn't get in trouble with the Gestapo. So he gave up his life to save his friends. And he was executed by guillotine at the age of 17. And anyway, it's a heroic story that I think needs to be told. And Angel Studios is in their final kind of getting ready to launch this next month. And considering the events, I thought it was super, super appropriate.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
I'm going to watch it. I think it'll be difficult to watch, but
yeah,
I think it's good.
It'll be more real, I think. And one thing too, I think his age is very meaningful. I think we live in a time right now that is, we live in a time where we have to realize that young people, I heard someone say once, if you look at what a man was reading in his 20s, I will tell you what his worldview is. There's a very formative period between about 17, I would say, through about 25. Maybe a little later for some people. It just kind of depends. Where a person is really figuring out what they're getting the narratives of the stories in their head. And I think certain groups have understood that. And that's why they've wanted, this is again to go back to sort of the Marxists understood this. They understood that if we can indoctrinate and sort of get our narratives into the head of young people in that age range, you kind of capture them for life, potentially. Like, this is the prime age when people are forming their worldview. And I think the church sort of realized that too. That's also how the church sends you on a mission. It's like, let's get the right stories in their heads. Right?
And people attribute like evil motives to this indoctrination or trying to trap you. They're trying to snare you. It's like, no, they just believe that it's good for you. Yeah. So of course they're going to try to do. The general culture tries to appeal to the same demographic, the 17 to 30-year-olds. That's like the key thing. Everybody's trying to appeal to them. But for some reason, it's only the church's fault for trying to do it, but not Game of Thrones' fault for trying to do the same thing. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm sorry that I'm trying to get you happily married with a bunch of kids that you're going to love and are going to be a major part of your life up until your 80s, 90s, 100s, whenever you end up leaving this world. My apologies. Sorry about that. Go consume whatever Netflix put out last month instead, I guess. It's ridiculous.
You're exactly right. Everyone. Why do you think we call it the marketplace of ideas? Everyone is competing to get you to believe their stories, the things that they're trying to tell you. That's the name of the game. The question isn't, are you going to be indoctrinated? The only question is who and why. So anyway, young people in this story of Helmuth Huebner, it's young people have to realize that this is, they're a huge part of this, and that you can make a huge difference on sort of the peer group that you're in. That's what Charlie was doing. Charlie was appealing to the younger generation because he understood that if we can get the younger generation on our side, we can change things big time. If we can persuade young people. The church understands this too. Why didn't the church put so much emphasis on its youth programs? It's like, if we can get people set up with the right narratives in their head from the start, then we can actually produce people whose hearts aren't totally manipulated. And the real irony is if that kid would have actually believed the narratives that the church has been desperately trying to put in his head since he was in primary, he never would have pulled that trigger. And so that is something to think about. That shooting didn't happen because of Mormonism. Are you kidding me? It happened 100% in spite of it. Mormonism was the thing that was desperately trying to keep that kid from doing something like this. So, all right, we got a ton of super chats. I got to go faster through these. All right. Charlie died a martyr because of Revelation 6, 9 through 11.
Not familiar with that specific one, but I agree with the general sentiment.
I say he was a martyr in a certain sense. He was a martyr for free speech. I think that
he was, but he was clearly motivated by a belief in Christ. And especially later in his life, I think that became the core of what he was trying to do.
Yeah. And now some people might take this the wrong way. I don't want this to be taken the wrong way at all.
They'll always find a way to take it the wrong way.
I know.
I'm getting to the point where I'm like,
I want to give every credit to Charlie Kirk for the things that he did. He was a great man who was doing a great work, and he is an icon in my mind of free speech and engagement. Okay. And I do want to be careful that people don't over kind of do it, to make him out to be some sort of a Jesus figure or something like that. Kind of like some people did with, like George Floyd or other things. Obviously they're totally different individuals, George Floyd and Charlie Kirk. But I think that the thing that I will most, where I think the real praise is due for Charlie Kirk, was his unabashed sort of, and I'm being honest here because if you were to ask me before this all happened about Charlie Kirk, I'd be like, yeah, I like Charlie Kirk. We agree on some things. Like, we probably would disagree on a bunch of religious stuff, but overall, I think he's a good guy with heads on his shoulders, doing good things in the country. Like, he likes President Trump a lot more than I do, but good on him. I'm glad we got President Trump instead of the alternative. You know, that would be sort of my opinion. So I also don't want to be one of these people that 2 days ago didn't really care that much. And then today is like, oh, he was so wonderful. It's like, you guys, like a week ago, you didn't even like talk about him. So there are people that, you know, he truly was like their hero. But for me, and I think as I've reflected on what he represents, is he represents that person who does what I'm so committed to on this channel. And what I've kind of dedicated the channel to, which is to engage in this world of ideas with the belief that we can actually change people's minds and hearts, and that is what ultimately will move the needle in our society. And to that, like, if you're a martyr for that cause, brother, let's build the statues. And that's kind of what it should be. And that he was a man who was not afraid. He understood that faith was, that sort of religion was at the root of all of these things, and he wasn't ashamed of it at all. And that to me is like, good on you. Like that you deserve. And if you get remembered for anything, that's what I want you to be remembered for, because those were the things that you stood for that I most strongly resonate with. And that I think that you can become a perpetual sort of long-term icon of, and a hero for. And I think that would be a beautiful sort of tribute to all that, to all of this mess, to make something good out of something evil. So, we ever find out what that scripture was? Revelation 6:9.
I did look it up, and it's talking about the altar that has the souls of them that were slain for the word of God, crying out to the Lord, how long until you avenge? And white robes are given to them, and yeah, then they receive the blessings.
I think beyond having to correct a few theological errors, I think that Charlie Kirk is someone who is headed to a very blessed afterlife.
I didn't want, because it is, it would seem flippant and point scoring almost to publicly be like, oh, Charlie's learned the truth now, like not appropriate whatsoever. However, I don't know, you're just kind of a little happy, not like, haha, we're right, but to know that he's received even more light and truth. And in my video, I said Charlie's at peace, but I really doubt that he's at rest. You know, rest in peace. I don't think he's at rest. That's not Charlie. He's at peace, but I think he's active. That good things are happening over there.
I agree. All right. Let's see. Gentile Ben. If the adversary is finely tuned and personally crafted temptations that lead us towards sin, then anger, then hatred. Hatred leads to the dark side. I agree. Anger and hatred that ends up being misplaced from ideas to people is what leads people to do terrible things to people. So we all need to watch out for that. And Luke, be sure to jump in and interrupt me because I grew up in a family where we all were, if you weren't aggressive, like you didn't get a word in. And so like, I'm used to people having.
Oh, I've stood outside of a hotel with you and your brother past 2 a.m, just talking to each other.
That's right. And by the way,
I was losing my voice though from talking the whole day, so I was fine just listening to you two. But you're not wrong about that.
You've seen where I get it from, but I hope that's one of the things like Forrest and I, like, I hope that we can be a model of two people who have tons of disagreements, but ultimately like care deeply about each other. I think that's the model that helps us to avoid this kind of thing and promote what I think Charlie was trying to promote. All right. Oops, I just unstarred that one. Oh crap. I lost a super chat. Sorry.
The most recent one. I can read it if you want.
Oh, you can? Oh no, it isn't the most recent one. It was back away.
Yeah, the one after Gentile Ben.
Oh, okay. You do have that one?
Yeah.
What was it? Read it.
It was the haystack, and they said the shooter was radicalized from a loss of identity as a child of God. Online avatars, echo chambers, furries, and gender confusion, all done online.
Identity confusion. Honestly, I think President Nelson, I just recently with my seminary students, we went over the identity talk from President Nelson. And he says, like, if there's one thing that your maker would like have you know, if he were to show up today, what would the talk that like our savior would give to you youth today? What would it be? He was basically like, it's about your identity. Because when you understand who you are and who your fellow men are, that's a totally different narrative than the one that person had going through their head. And if they had listened to our prophet's words and believed them, this wouldn't have happened. All right, I was 15 feet away from everything we went down. Thank you for being a beacon of light to me in this time. Love you guys. Well, we love you, and we're hope that you're dealing with this in the best way you can. Obviously, being that close to something this horrific is gonna hit you hard. So
Yeah, I feel like I can't comment because nothing like that has happened to me. But
yeah,
try to turn it into good. Use it to motivate you towards good things, and not like do what you got to do to recover from that.
Our prayers are with you. All right. Truth and testimony. A society that permits the murder of babies will inevitably cheer the murder of adults. Lila Rose.
Yeah, no lies detected.
And I think if we watch our recent general conference with an entire talk about the respect for life, man, talk about prophetic. Like, think about the whole idea of the respect for life and how that plays into the reaction that some people have with Charlie Kirk's death, to where his death is somehow, like, his life is somehow less meaningful because he holds ideas that people think are bad. Like,
and that's the perfect example of humans getting in the way of ideologies, political ideologies, worldview ideologies. It's exactly what happened with communism.
Yep.
That type of thing.
Here goes Cardinal on Luke. Luke has a superpower being able to deadpan stare while Jacob rants in a very animated ways. It's a thing of beauty. Thank you. And there it is. Luke, looking good as always.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Cardin. I don't know what to do, man. Got to tell me what to do with my face. I don't want to wink. That doesn't seem right.
That's hilarious.
Jonah eyebrows.
I know. That's funny. All right. Next one. Here we go. LDS response. Helaman 6 shows what happens when people of God embrace secular secret combination. The church is experiencing that now. I do think that the church is facing ideological pressure from the outside that is infecting the saints. There's no doubt about that. And I think that it is our job as Latter-day Saints to, I mean, that's what I try and do on my channel. I'm trying to talk about things that are true and contrast them with things that are false. And so I hope that's helpful to people. Luke, any thoughts?
Just that the chapter heading for the chapter that he referenced says, both peoples prosper during an era of peace and plenty. Lucifer, the author of sin, stirs up the hearts of the wicked, and the Gadianton robbers in murder and wickedness. The robbers take over the Nephite government. So that's what he's referring to. And lots of scripture references today.
Hey,
I think it's the most scripture reference heavy live stream I've ever been on.
That's what happens on a Sunday.
And I think it's a good thing to turn to when we experience things like what happened on Wednesday.
It is really funny how I feel like the scriptures, like when I'm kind of dealing with stuff in any way, personally, professionally, whatever, it's like they just like jump out at me. They just hit me. And that's like, I get emotional reading certain passages. I remember I was having a hard time one time and I read the Sermon on the Mount and the whole, like, if the Lord will provide for the beasts of the fields and the fowl, it's like, I was like, man, it just like jumped off and just screamed at me. And read your scriptures, guys.
The one that has been hitting me has been pray for your enemies and love them that hate you and despitefully use you. And then, of course, Jesus exemplifying that teaching that he gave in the Sermon on the Mount on the cross when he said, forgive them for they know not what they do. Like, oh, I am not there yet. I'll take your word for it, though, and I will try. And honestly, I do think that those scriptures have informed my response and have put me in a better place because of it.
Yeah, no, I think that people are actually, there's a super chat here I want to get to that actually talks about what I want to talk about. I'll lead right into it. First, Rebecca, thank you very much for the donation there. I don't know if he meant to have something, but appreciate it. Jason Ashby says, be peacemaker, say something nice about liberals. Well, first of all, I consider myself a liberal in the classical tradition. But I actually wanted to, there's kind of this thing right now where people are sort of like, oh, we all need to be peacemakers and all that. And it's like, and then there are people that are really mad about that. And, you know, peacemaking actually is, in a certain way, it's what Charlie was doing. It may sound counterintuitive to a lot of people, and that's what I believe that hopefully my channel can do. You come to a unity when people actually have ideologies that are consistent with one another. There's a reason that the people that you surround yourself with share a common set of values with you. Values, when they're misaligned, it causes friction and problems. The more your value systems align with other people, the more you're going to be able to harmonize yourself with them in your engagements in human interaction, right? And so the more we become unified in the principles that we believe in, and it, like, would the world be more unified if everyone believed that we were all children of God? Yes. Does that mean that we're ideologically diverse? No. I'm not looking for ideological diversity. Maybe there's a certain number of different ideas that I hope that we kind of have and can bounce off each other to try and find out what the truth is, but the truth is one. The truth is a unifying force. When we know, if we all, the only question is, what do we unify around? The reason we have division is because we don't talk with each other enough, and we get into these echo chambers. When we're all in echo chambers, you have two different worldviews that are totally at odds. And then when you try and put those people together in the same church or in any group or society, you have friction. Conversation helps people to sort through all of the ideas and to figure out what they believe. And the truth, people who pursue the same thing, the truth, will arrive at unity around those truths. And so for me, peacemaking is not about passively sitting there and just shutting up and being like I think Jordan Peterson said something really, really brilliant. He said, you're not a peacemaker because you're harmless. You're not, like, being harmless isn't a virtue. It's when you actually are choosing to not be violent, even though, and I don't mean like violent, like physically, or let's say to cause harm to other people, even though you could, and you're using the power that you have for good rather than evil. But if you have no power at all, and you're trying to wrap that, your cowardice and inaction, as like, I'm just being a peacemaker. It's like, no, you're not. You're just being a coward because you wouldn't do anything anyway. And you're trying to act like your cowardice is a virtue. But you know what is actually making peace? It's something you do actively. And oftentimes it requires conflict with other ideas. Because when you have ideologies out there that warp minds and you do nothing about it, you're not a peacemaker. You're just a coward. You're lazy. Like Christ, what did Christ do with ideas that were false? He sit there and just say to the Pharisees, oh, it's okay. You do you. No, he was like, that's wrong. But he also, with the Romans, who were the worst oppressors of all, he went against what everybody expected the Messiah to do. The Messiah was supposed to be using violence. The story of Jesus Christ is the story of rejecting violence and seeking to change human hearts. So if you want to be a peacemaker, get out there and help us change human hearts. That's what peacemakers do. And if people who think that, if people get mad at me and like, oh, you're like stir the pot and cause contention or whatever, it's like, well, you know what? The only way you're ever going to get peace is if people come into alignment with Christ. There's no peace outside of Christ and his principles and the principles of his gospel. And the closer the world gets to it, the more there'll be peace. And the more that we just sit idly by and don't do anything and don't actually try and make peace, there won't be any. And you didn't have a dead stare on that rant. It was you had some good reactions.
Perfect.
So
it's hard work just sitting here.
I know. Well, real quick, we have to say something nice about let's say liberals, say people on the other side of the
it's a malleable term. I will say that they seem to be motivated out of personal motivations. So like you'll have a gay friend, you'll have a black friend, you'll care about actual people that you personally know, and that's what motivates a lot of their opinions, and I can respect that. I don't want them to think that I'm attacking whoever it is they think they're defending when I attack their beliefs, and that's why it's important to be very cognizant of how we're carrying on these conversations.
Agreed. And I would say that it's that would be my same thing. The real shame with sort of the woke mind virus, as people call it, including myself, is that it actually preys on the best of us. It preys on your best sort of emotions. The part of you that's empathetic, that cares about someone, that's you've been through the really hard thing with people, and that's what it preys on. It takes that sort of empathetic response and then warps it into something really dark, ultimately. All right, next super chat. Jay Ops says, you teach my nephew in seminary. He loves your class as a proud aunt, and it warms my heart to know he's getting to learn from you. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm wondering, the last name isn't the same as anyone in my class, but no, that's great. I love my seminary students. I have a great class. I have juniors and seniors, and I love every one of them. They're just, I'm really, really lucky. Like, some seminary classes can be more or less, but I just, it's super easy because I have a great class. So
How
thank
many
you
do
for
you
that.
have, by the way?
I think in this class I have 13.
That's a nice size.
Yeah, it's about a perfect
Yeah.
size. So it isn't huge, isn't so big that it gets unmanageable. So I just got a great group, and yeah, so it's awesome. All right. Let me do simple signs. If we can't talk about views, we won't have a view. I think I agree with that.
I think that's kind of true. There's another pithy statement by Winston Churchill, I believe. If you are not able to change your mind, you won't be able to change much of anything.
Very true. Next, I've tried to sleep on it 3 days in a row to see if I feel different, but no, I'm filled with so much hatred for these people, that poor man. I hope you continue to pray and sleep on it, because I really do have to think, but for the grace of God, go I. If I was in some different situation, who's to say that I wouldn't act differently?
And I don't think you should try to quash that, or like something's wrong with you because you feel that way. It's more about channeling it.
Oh, agreed.
In the right direction.
Brilliantly put. That is exactly what I feel. It's sort of like, I think I've been liberated myself, because there's a side of you that it has this sort of, and I think it's a very masculine energy to want to like fight something, crush something, win, beat, like it's in you. And it's one of those passions that needs to be put somewhere productive. And what I have found is literally this framing of like violence or ideas. I've gone, wait, I can take all of that energy, all of that zeal, and employ it in the battlefield of ideas. We have entire hymns about like flash the sword above the foe and all these kinds of things. Please, guys, recognize this is not talking about violence. It's talking about the spiritual battle that we're fighting. And I do talk a lot about ideology and ideas, and I think that's important, but I also recognize that I think maybe I'm being a little too narrow when I say that, because I would say that people are moved more by the spirit that possesses them than the ideas. But I also would say that the ideas are part of that. The combination of the spirit that possesses you and the ideas in your head and the narratives that you tell yourself, those two things sort of combined, I think, are what drive people ultimately. And to know that you can influence that realm of, to use a more modern lingo term, like to change the vibe and to change the ideas in the lives of other people, like that's the game. And it's not about hurting those people, right? It's not like you're filled with hatred. Like, where's that going to lead? What are you going to do with that? Are you going to use it to hurt those people? Is that where we're going? Like, if you're a Christian, you need to recognize that Christ actually has a place for you to take that and put it into something that actually builds his kingdom. So like, join us.
Well, yeah, use it to turn yourself into somebody the opposite of what the shooter was.
Yes.
Go down the opposite path. Don't go down the same path, but just on the opposite side of the coin. Choose the opposite path, the opposite direction.
Absolutely. And do it. And that's kind of the whole Zion idea, right? I have a whole video series. I dropped back on this just a few days ago, actually. It's this idea of the inside out. Use that to build the kingdom. Take that energy. And part of building the kingdom is engaging in the battlefield of ideas and in the battlefield of spiritual. Again, I hate using the word vibes, but it's like the best thing I can do, like changing the spirit in people's lives. Bring the spirit into your own lives, bring it into others, and also bring in all the good ideas. And now you're battling. You're in it. You're in the fight. That's what fighting looks like. And you actually, what's wild is you can actually see it help people. Like on my channel, and you know this, Luke, and all of us that have been involved in this little space that we have, when we get those messages from people where we've actually made an impact, it's kind of like the victory of the battlefield. It's like we won that one. And it's the best feeling in the world. And it, not because, and again, not to like say that we're so great or anything like that. It's because it's like you've seen the Lord work in someone's life. These aren't my ideas. This isn't my spirit. In fact, I very much have to work against the vibes in my own life and my own sort of natural man to try and get that spirit into my life. But ultimately, when I see other people sort of feel it, I mean, all of us that have served missions that had, so many of us have had these kinds of experiences where we've seen these sort of the way what we have can change people's hearts. And it's a beautiful thing. And so don't let that hatred take you to dark places. Let it be channeled and transformed through Christ into something that builds his kingdom, and be a part of it. All right. Lane Pitcher. President Nelson's call to peacemaking is prophetic. It is choosing Christ-like courage, humility, and respect, not weakness or silence. Could not agree more. I think that's what we've been getting at. All right. Next, Motocross Kid. Watched Ward Radio last night. When is our Christian duty to speak boldly and defend truth, even at the risk of conflict? And when is our duty to be quiet and be peacemakers? How do we find that line? You go first. What do you think, Luke? I have thoughts on this.
It is so difficult. It is so difficult in some senses. And they already said they watched Word Radio, so I guess I'm just going to repeat myself again. But these things are hard to conceptualize, and there's not like a systematic, you don't read a book and then you figured out everything. You go through the flow chart and you figure out everything. It is almost a vibe. It's a way of being. And I think that's why we have thousands of pages of scripture, is because it's not just here's the manual, here's the flow chart, do A, B, C, D, and you're good. It's more organic. We're human. These things are complex. It's a whole way of seeing the world. And so I think looking at how people in the Book of Mormon on both sides addressed this problem, how Jesus addressed it, how they responded in different situations, you kind of learn by osmosis. You kind of absorb the character of these people, and then along with the spirit, that will inform decisions on a case-by-case basis. That's kind of what I think about it.
So I'm going to read the words of our prophet here. I would encourage everyone to read the talk from 1994, Teach Us Tolerance and Love, by President Nelson in April of 1994. I'm going to put this on the screen real quick, and let's take a look at what he says. He says, the assignment requires great fortitude as well as love. It says, in latter days, devoted disciples of the Lord are just as firm. Real love for the sinner may compel courageous confrontation, not acquiescence. Real love does not support self-destructive behavior. So don't think immediately, and there's way more in this. It's really, really great. You should read the whole thing. But do not think that conflict is the spirit of contention. Also, everyone needs to go read the scriptures, what it actually says. Jesus does not say that contention is of the devil. He doesn't say that. That's not
Correct.
what it says. What does it say, Luke? Do you remember what it says?
The spirit of contention.
The spirit of contention.
Which seems to be that the contention is the point, is what it seems to be getting at. Contention is what you're going for. Not what you're contending for is the core, but the contention itself is the core.
Can you have contention without the spirit of contention? I think absolutely. Yeah. If I have a spirit of contention, it's like I want to fight. I'm angry. I want the other person. That's my motivation, right? And that can happen to all of us, right? The spirit of contention is a problem. Contention is actually commanded in the scriptures multiple times to contend for the faith. multiple times. So you have to recognize there isn't a contradiction there. I have a whole video about this, by the way. I talked about my reaction to the Peacemaker talk, and I wanted people to understand what President Nelson is saying and what he's not saying. Okay. Because you have President Nelson himself saying literally that, hey, there's times when you need to be confrontational. But you're right. Now, I don't think being a peacemaker means, I do not conflate being quiet with being a peacemaker. Heck no. But you're trying to make peace, right? So, and like sustainable long-term peace, not just, hey, I'm just going to shut my mouth and be quiet and not do anything. But you have to judge that. And that's what you were talking about, Luke. And President Nelson talks about this in his talk. It's sort of like you're going to have to make that call through personal revelation. You know, is this the time to do that? I can tell you there were times today when my wife and I were kind of on each other's nerves about something. And I was like, you know what? I just need to drop it and go back and apologize and make things right. And I made peace and it's good. But that's whatever it is. We need to, do not think being a peacemaker means sitting on the sidelines and being quiet. That's not true. Go be a peacemaker. That is something you do actively.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it happens in the broader social scheme of things. It happens when we have unity of essential principles about who we are and right and wrong. And I think that the more clarity we have on that, the more unity we get, and the more we differ is the more we get conflict and division.
I recently read a biography of Winston Churchill, big book. It was like a 50-hour long audiobook. And of course, he's the prime minister in Great Britain during World War II. Amazing speeches that President Holland has quoted several times that I highly recommend people reading if they haven't. But as this book is going on, Winston is not the prime minister. He's in like the minority party. He's kind of in the political wilderness. And Hitler just keeps making move after move. And Winston keeps telling him, you got to stop this. You got to stop this. Hitler keeps moving. They keep acquiescing. They keep compromising. They keep allowing him to get away with things. And one of the very last things he did, I forget which thing it was. He's annexing Austria, something like that. Yeah. After he's done 5 other things that he wasn't supposed to do, according to the peace accord that they had after World War I. He does another thing that he's not supposed to do. And the prime minister goes and flies out there, Chamberlain, and comes back saying that I have an agreement with Hitler. We've made a pact with the Nazi party, and now we have peace in our time. And in his journal, he talks about how that Churchill over there was giving this speech about how Hitler did all these things and he's just going to do something else. And I kind of feel bad for Churchill, but I'm happy that we got it and it's resolved and we're done. Well, a couple months later, he's out because Germany's invaded Poland with the Soviet Union, and now Churchill's in there to try and clean up the mess. And Churchill, in that instance, was the peacemaker that was saying, hold the line, do not give the Nazis these things that they're not supposed to have. Can you not see that they are just taking and taking and taking, and they're not going to stop until they're confronted? He was trying to make peace. World War II could have been avoided if they had listened to Churchill. But what did they call him instead? Warmonger. Doesn't sound like a label you'd give a peacemaker, but it was.
And that is a challenging call to make. There is a time for conflict and there is a time not to. I think right now we're at a time where there are so many false ideologies out there, from gender ideologies to political ideologies to notions about men and women and their roles in society to notions around abortion to every other thing, to what are our priorities of family and society and career, all those kinds of things that are so warped that it's time for us to start speaking out against them more boldly. This is what my channel is dedicated to, and I hope other people will do similar. Or support those who do, right? Support the cause in whatever way that you can. So let's go on to the next one here. Should Mike Lee be fired for his comments about Melissa Hortman's assassination?
Well, Mike Lee's a public servant, so the public is the one that hires him and fires him. So that's for the people that decide in the election.
My personal thought is I don't know enough about the situation. I heard some stuff about it on the news, but I haven't followed all the things. If he said things that are inappropriate, I'll condemn it. And another thing I would do, and I mentioned this earlier, with anyone, I would rather talk with them and try and have a great conversation in the spirit of Charlie Kirk about their worldview and see if there are ways that I could persuade them or others who are listening to be persuaded to change their point of view, right? So in the world of what I'm doing and you're doing, Luke, in this world of kind of public advocacy, as I call it, usually it's not about the person across from me that I'm talking to. It's about the people that are watching and listening. They're the ones that hopefully will get something out of it and maybe be pushed one way or another in their worldview. And so with Mike Lee specifically, like, I don't know that I'm going to convince Mike Lee of something, but like I would want to know. And if he was unrepentant and did seem to have an attitude that he like legitimately felt that someone deserved to be killed, like, yeah, I would be all for. I would not support Mike Lee in any way, shape, or form ever again if he was indeed okay with the assassination of political opponents. No
Which
problem.
he wasn't, but he was definitely being very flippant about an assassination, and he did delete the tweet.
Good. And that's the other thing. If he
And in elections, you're picking between people. It's not just is this guy good or bad? It's who's better.
And if
Mike
I had somebody
Lee or somebody else.
If I had somebody who tweeted something about Charlie Kirk and had said like, yeah, you know, but he did say these stupid things, and then they retracted the statement and then they issued an apology, I'd accept the apology. I'd say, look, at the end of the day, we can all have emotions run high. We can all say stupid things. I'll tweet something stupid on the toilet. And you know what? I'll forgive others as they forgive me. I hope the Lord will be as merciful with me as I can try to be with others. And I always try and remember that. And so I always am like, look, I want the Lord to be really nice to me. So I'm going to try and be nice to other people. All right. Next up, thought on Utah's response to Charlie Kirk's murder versus GF.
That must be George Floyd, I think.
Oh,
I'm glad it's not 2020. That's all I have to say about that.
I will say, when certain people have a death, or I don't want to put it in that terms, let's just say that certain worldviews will lead people to burn and riot in the streets when something tragic happens, and another worldview will cause them to hold prayer vigils and start going to church. So I tend to associate with ideologies that push people closer to Christ, and so that's generally the political movements that if I have to choose between two, that's the one I'm probably going to back and support. So, DNC State went to fight in 134. Yeah. And essentially the doctrine is the more you bear it, the better. We are actually, I had this discussion with the youth just before all this. It's actually really funny. It was like, no joke.
Well, because 98 was the section from last week.
We were talking about the expulsion of the Missouri Saints and what the Lord's, I mean, literally they were dealing with all these things that were people killed. I think it's very instructive to see what the Lord says in that circumstance. You had people killed, raped, harmed in all sorts of ways. What did the Lord say? And for all of you guys who are like, oh, yeah, peacemaking is very much a sissy. Meanwhile, you're some like fat doofus in your mom's basement. Sorry, I don't internet tough guys don't impress me. The like when to fight is, what does the Lord say to them? The Lord himself through the prophet Joseph Smith basically says like, turn the other cheek and turn it again and seek legal redress. But what's interesting is this: long suffering is not endless suffering. There is a point at which you are justified in responding in kind.
And the word fight has a lot of different connotations.
Yes.
So like he's telling him to turn the other cheek and also seek legal redress. Well, that's a legal fight.
Yep.
And so
but he did, they did raise up Zion's camp to go and protect them using violence if necessary in defense of human rights. That is justified. So here's the thing. If anyone who wants violence and they want to know where that line is for me, when people are physically in danger, and not someone got assassinated, but like there is a mass movement to like come in and burn down your neighborhood or something, arm yourselves. When there were the George Floyd's riot, I had a gun sitting next to my nightstand that was loaded because I could hear things in the distance in downtown Reno. I could hear bangs from things that were happening in my own hometown. And so guess what? Yep, I was ready to use violence if necessary to protect those I love. I'm not some wild pacifist that doesn't do anything, okay? I believe wars can be justified, but I will do everything I can to avoid that and use that as an absolute last resort, because that is what the Lord, who is the one that I follow, has commanded me as his disciple. That is the attitude that I'm supposed to have. So that is the one I will have. And anyone advocating for violence in response to this is only crapping all over the grave of Charlie Kirk, who was a beacon of using the word over the sword. So, anything else?
Nope.
All right, let's go to the next one.
Got it.
Oh, goodness, I got to burn through these fast. Yeah. If we go out even more and another murder happens, what then? Do you think I think we are going into a new, better chapter or darker? Do you think we're going into a better chapter or darker? That's sort of the question. I actually think I'm actually optimistic. I think enough people understand what Charlie Kirk stood for. There are those who are angry, and there are people that are trying to sort of gather the angry mob together. But I think people are moving into a better chapter. If something like this happens again, it's just up to us to again double down on the same thing. Now, if it, again, it's sort of the Doctrine and Covenants principle we just talked about. Happens again, turn the other cheek. There is a point at which, if it's widespread violent revolution and social order breaks down, like, yeah, violence then becomes a tool that's necessary to protect life, liberty, and property. But I'm not going there first. That's the last place. That's when everything is terrible. Like, it's like Charlie Kirk happening every single day, over and over. Like, is that what we want? Like, I can't think of anything I could want less than that. Like, I don't, when the revolution comes, Jacob Hansen doesn't do YouTube anymore, you guys. Because if words are futile anymore, why would I put out my words? At that point, if the only thing I can use is violence, then I have to go into this is like Book of Mormon, like the worst parts of the Book of Mormon are when all of that breaks down and the only thing that's left is violence. Like, the Book of Mormon is a book about the violence ruining everything, like going that route. So no, let's not go to Ukraine, where Ukraine and Russia are right now. Let's not go to where these things go. Let's pull our nose out of it, condemn what's happened, recommit ourselves to nonviolent conversation, and honor Charlie. All right, let's go to the next one. Favorite Doctrine and Covenant section. Luke, you go first.
I think I would have to go with 76, just because of the paradigm shift that the Kingdoms of Glory introduces into our whole conception of the plan of salvation, which is everything. So I think I have to go with that, although certainly there are many others that are great sections.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm looking right now. It is... yeah, it's on the same vein as yours at section 88. I feel like it gives it expands it in a bigger way. I think it does more to understand who we are and who God is, and the nature of the Kingdoms of Glory in section 88, kind of the idea of the laws that we have to live according to. That one is so profound, it just knocks me over. Again, it's one of those ones that I'm just like, Joseph Smith, bro, you were like a genius, or you're inspired, because what you did here with this is just a miraculous work of, again, I'm going to put on the atheist hat. I still would be like, dang, like that is some cool myth making you're doing. Like, no wonder you started a world religion. Like, this is cool stuff. So, all right. Captain Moroni used forced and executed Nephite citizens. I hate and don't want that option. At some point, God did allow it. Where do you draw the line? I think Captain Moroni was justified. I think that when there's a legitimate like threat of mass violence, I think that the law, and I think that I think this young man should get the death penalty, as should all murderers, in my opinion. If it's a cold-blooded murder, I don't think it should be this long, crazy process. I mean, I do think it needs to, when it's just like in this case or whatever, like if it's just very, very clear that this person did it, they confess, whatever, like execute them. In fact, and I say that in this sense, like people say, well, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If I commit murder, you all have my permission to execute me. Like, I expect you to. And in fact, frankly, and this is probably false doctrine, and it isn't the doctrine of the church. Maybe it's just Jacob Hansen's musings. Like, I would personally feel better. I would feel like I did something to repent of it by offering my life up. I would say I have done something so wrong that the taking of my life is what I would offer up as a sign of my contrition and repentance. Send me to God as the justifiable consequence for what I've done. That is, and I would be, and that would be justifiable. So the line where violence is allowed is in the protection of human rights, which at the core of, we can debate over, that's a good thing to debate. But at the core of it are life, liberty, and property. Violence can be justified to protect life. It can be used to protect liberty, and it can be used to protect property. We do it all the time.
And it's so hard. You don't just need the right justification, but you need the right person to carry it out. The American Revolution is a fluke of all flukes. To have Jefferson and Adams and Washington and Hamilton all in the same room together is an act of God. And only having those type of people, especially Washington, in those positions to carry out the political violence that created America is, you don't just get that. Like, once you're justified and starting a revolution, it doesn't automatically turn into America. It automatically turns into France.
Yeah, French.
And you have to have somebody like a George Washington, a Captain Moroni, to conduct that self-defense, that political violence properly, or it just evolves. And so it's a fine line.
It's a dangerous, dangerous thing. And violence perpetuates violence, and it should be avoided and controlled. And you should only authorize your agents in the state to do violence, as it were, which is basically everything they do, that you would be justified to do yourself. So would I be justified in taking someone and using violence against them to knock them down and restrain them from stealing my money? Yes, I would. I'd be totally justified in doing that. Would I be justified in, if they stole $5 from me and ran away, and shooting them in the back of the head? No, I would not. So I'm not going to authorize my representatives in the state to shoot someone who steals $5. They're running away with someone's $5 bill, right? So you can simplify a lot of this. I have a whole video on this in my series of, where Ezra Taft Benson actually talks about these principles of government, and it is essentially violence. Think about, if you did the violence yourself, where would you be justified in Christ's eyes? And I think that the scriptures can provide examples where I can never think of an example in scripture except for in the defense of those sorts of things. So let's go to the next one. We're going to fly through these, and then you guys, if you have a super chat, get it in, because we're going to be wrapping this up pretty fast. All right. A person who cheers what happened to Charlie is himself one step removed from acting out in the same way to hearing ideas he doesn't like. A company firing such a person is an act of self-defense. I think that can be true.
Yeah. Seems reasonable.
What do we do during this Tower of Babel moment when we don't agree on the meaning of life, marriage, babies, men, and women? This is actually a great comment. A Tower of Babel moment. What a great way to put it. Gold pill. Way to go. Confusion abounds ideologically about all sorts of things. And one of the things that has to be clarified in the realm of ideas are the words that you're using. Language is, and I have a video series on this where we talk about language. Language is a powerful tool, and those who manipulate it That's why that Prop 8 wasn't about like stopping gay people from going out and like having ceremonies where they like, and then having the state even give them civil unions that gave them all the same legal rights. It was about changing the legal definition of the term marriage, because that would create a social change in the way that we define marriage. It was a battle over a word, and they won. And they changed the definition of marriage. And now even a huge number of Latter-day Saints just talk about gay marriage as if it's a marriage. They just absorb it. Why? Because the language changed. Language is power. And you can hate the postmodernist philosophers all you want, but they're right. They're right that language, in this respect, they're right in the respect that language controls ideas, and ideas control people. So if you can change the language, you can change the way people think about things, and you can change their paradigms, and you can get them to more easily move in one direction or another. That's why good conversation and debate matters, because it helps to sort out and clarify what you mean by those terms and help people to understand the ideas and sort through all the jargon and nonsense that people get in their echo chambers. And so I think, what do? We start talking to each other and we sort out the language. So we know what we mean by life, marriage, babies, men and women. Which is one of the reasons I want to do a debate on the subject of, like, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? Can a man be a woman? Is transgenderism real? So, but again, that would all come down to definitions. So great comment. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we're there yet. I'm questioning when persuasion is not enough. I live around many ex-members who are celebrating, and it scares me to the core. So what's your alternative?
That makes sense.
I know you're scared. So what's the other one? So what's our solution? If we're not going to use words to persuade people, what are you going to do? It's going to be something with violence. And it could be you being violent, or it could be you having your agents in the government and somehow crack down and use violence to stop them from thinking a certain way or having these abhorrent ideas. You guys, if you don't have persuasion, everything gets dark. And there are people who won't be persuaded. That's fine. I have lots of people that won't be persuaded. And sometimes you have to distance yourself from those people, but that's a tragedy. When people can't even live with people with contrary opinions.
But when persuasion is not enough, this is why I was kind of talking about external locus, internal locus, and then internal locus with safety net, is that in Doctrine and Covenants, I think it was 98 again, the saints are in bad straits, and they're actually going to be kicked out of Jackson County. They weren't going to be persuading people to let them stay there. The first thing the Lord said to them was kind of like, hey, knock it off, be happy and grateful. And it kind of like, be still and know that I'm God. Yep. And that's almost like an offensive thing to say to somebody. It's like the meme of don't tell a woman to calm down. of
don't tell
like, how dare you tell me like things are falling apart? How dare you tell me to just like, relax, man, be happy, don't be afraid, man. But it's God saying it is the difference. And so even when everything falls apart and there actually isn't anything you can do to stop the evil, to stop the darkness, to stop the bad things coming, you can still live in confidence. And God actually wants you to. It's like a commandment.
Well, I think that's sort of the story of Mormon and Moroni, and Moroni, the later Moroni.
And Abinadi.
Yeah, when they look around and are like, everyone, like they like, that's who I'd read about. You don't have a problem with defending yourself. That's always on the table. But again, what is like, okay, so you can defend yourself. That's always justified. And you can play offense with your words. But if you can't do either of those, or if you can't do, play offense with your words, as it were, then yeah, it's out of your control and you'll have to figure out how to deal with it. But I think that persuading individual people, you basically don't ever do with your words directly. That's why I do this, because people listen. They're not like, if I had someone who disagreed with me on here and I was trying to persuade them, it wouldn't work. But if that same person was watching me have a debate with someone on that topic, they'd be way more easily persuadable. Why? Because when I'm talking to you, Luke, you're in the hot seat, you're defensive. So you feel like you have to win and not like lose the argument. But when you're just listening as an objective third-party observer, you actually can be persuaded. That's what Charlie Kirk was doing. That's why do you guys think Mormon Stories is so effective on so many people? It's because they sit there and there's someone who's outside the situation who watches them talk, and then they are persuaded by what they're saying. People generally are influenced not directly by someone preaching to them. They're actually influenced by listening to conversations between other people. And when you have good people having good conversations over and over again, especially with people that disagree with them, the truth ends up coming out and people are actually persuaded. And it's why I've been shocked at how many people have written me saying that I've helped them be persuaded to different points of view. And so, again, more conversation. Charlie was the icon of that. So yes, absolutely. All right. These things I have spoken to you that you may have peace. In the world you'll have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Love that scripture.
He says as he's about to get killed and rock their world completely in ways that they couldn't imagine.
Yes, in not only killed totally unfairly. Like in
the most humiliating, unfair way possible.
And this is where I wanted to say earlier, I want to be careful people don't get too carried away with their comparisons of, Charlie Kirk to Jesus or something like that. But it should make you think of how great the sacrifice of Christ was. It was totally unjustified. It was public. It was, he literally was the person who didn't do anything wrong. And he was being murdered publicly in front of his mother. Like, okay, that is wrong. And yet, what does he say? So I think we need to learn from the way the Savior responded to injustice. And his revolution that he started, which was not the revolution of the Zealots and the people who wanted to kill all the Romans. His revolution has outlasted the Roman Empire. His ways are more powerful than the ways of short-term violence. So we should always remember that. If you teach true doctrine / principles, people will live righteous lives rather than attacking people's fruits. But shouldn't we get more clarification from the top down about current false doctrine? Luke, what do you think?
Somebody made a comment to this effect on X, and my reply was that it's not that they're not saying these things, it's that we're not listening. And yeah, so do you put the blame with the person that's saying it, but they only said it 2 times? They needed to say it 10 times. Or do you put the blame with the person that hears it 2 times and still isn't doing anything about it?
Well, and I would say this too. I look at it and I go, here's the thing. People want them to get so overly specific. And I think that's actually dangerous. I think that the church
and just not practical.
Well, like the church needs to come out and specifically talk about every legislation and all sorts of stuff. And maybe I would agree. Sometimes I wish the church would be a little more specific on certain things, but I leave that to their judgment call. And I always remember that they teach general principles. Their job is to teach the universal truths of the gospel that are related to these situations. Respect for life, the dignity of all human people, the need for peacemaking, as if those weren't the absolute general principles at play in this exact situation with the murder of Charlie Kirk. Like, I don't think I could have given you more general sort of principles that falls within. That's their job. If we morons can't figure out how to apply those principles in our lives, you think the shooter cared about human life? Do you think the shooter cared about peacemaking? The prophet was literally telling the shooter and all of the world to do all of the things that the shooter rejected. And yet you're sitting here saying, we need to get more clarification? I mean, no. You need to learn how to actually govern yourself based on the principles of the gospel, because principles have universal application. If you want a law-based religion that gives you everything to do in every single situation in life and comments on every single specific, that just isn't the gospel of Jesus Christ. The gospel teaches you principles that you then, they're like an algorithm. Your life is giving you inputs and you need to give outputs, but you have to run it through an algorithm to figure out, okay, based on the inputs that come in, what are the outputs I'm going to do? The principles of the gospel are like the code of the algorithm. When you understand the principles and you arrange them properly in their hierarchical order, what principles matter more than others, right? That is where you get the right response. And that algorithm is as complex as the gospel itself. You have to learn all of these principles. You read the stories, you learn sort of the way that all of these or the scriptures, and you learn the way all these principles are meant to interact. Like the scriptures sort of give you in a narrative form the algorithm, and as you read them and you seek revelation from them, you will internalize those principles, and they'll teach you how to be in this world. And so people who just want sort of the law of Moses again to tell them exactly what they need to do in every situation, they just aren't understanding. And I think that and I'm not saying, I don't want to be too harsh here. Like, I do think there are times that I wish the church would get a little bit more specific. But as a general rule, I just remember that they're there to teach the principles of the gospel that are universally applicable, not to be political commentators and social commentators. I don't think that's their job. All right. 2 scriptures. Alma 1. I feel like I better understand what it was like when Nehor slew Gideon. DNC, I, the Lord, will forgive whom I will forgive, but if for you, it is required to forgive all men. Powerful stuff. Clay Boog, you cannot be a peacemaker for Christ unless you possess faith, hope, and charity. Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
And courage. Courage to actually stand up for those things and for the gospel. The trans community knew it was going to happen. Evidenced on X, there needs to be more done in Utah to root them out. I don't know about any of this. I'm not going to endorse anything that you're saying. However, I will say that there are disturbing, from my understanding, there are disturbing rates of violent sort of attitudes and reactions amongst the transgender so-called community, the gender confused community, because they see it as some sort of existential threat to their existence and identity. And when you teach people that their existence and identity is wrapped up in some sort of an ideology and their own confused identity, that gets right to the heart of people, and they will react badly. So it doesn't surprise me. But to root them out, I wouldn't say that's like, what is that? What do you mean by that? I would say, why don't we challenge those ideas and help them and everyone else to realize this is absolute madness, and men are men and women are women. And there are some people who struggle mentally with some sort of a dysphoria about being male or female.
This person may be talking about a tweet that went out about, I need to do something about the Charlie Kirk event. And then a reply to that same, I think it was a tweet. They said something big's going to happen on Wednesday. But we don't know. But investigation ongoing, how much involved other people were into this. If that's what you're talking about, obviously people who foment this kind of stuff online probably do need to be more carefully tracked and monitored. Don't want to turn into a surveillance state, but awareness does need to happen.
And who
but
knows?
Probably the awareness
that could reference. It could be there. Oh, there's something big's going to happen on Wednesday. We got a big protest planned, or something like that. You know
well, no, it was like Charlie Kirk needs to die, and then like something big's going to happen on Wednesday, and there's speculation.
Well, I don't know. I'd be interested. Again, let the investigators do their investigation. And oh my goodness, just stay away from the conspiracy theories. I've seen so much stuff about
Frank Turek's military signals.
Signals. And by the way, Frank, you and I disagree on a lot of stuff. I feel so bad. I absolutely disavow any nutcase who says that about you. You're a good man. I know that you must be going through a lot with this whole situation, with you being there, knowing Charlie. Like, my prayers are with you. even though we obviously have our very strong disagreements, theologically speaking, but I view as a great man and a good Christian.
And this is part of the problem with conspiracy theory is like, just because something fits the theory doesn't make the theory correct. For example,
Yeah.
there could be an invisible elephant behind me, and all the evidence you see in this frame comports with the fact, conforms with the theory that there's an invisible elephant behind me. Obviously, there's not an invisible elephant behind me, and just because
that's what they want you to believe.
Exactly.
That's what
just
they
because
want you to believe.
information you have aligns with the possibility of an invisible elephant behind me does not mean, therefore, invisible elephant behind Luke right now. And so you have to be very careful with just because the facts seem to fit, therefore the theory is true. Take a step back. Consider
Agreed.
other options.
Yep. Agreed. All right. Next, conflict is not contention. This is Snagrit, good old Snagrit. We love you, Snagrit. Conflict is not contention. Contention is the spirit of disdain or hostility towards others. I would say the spirit of contention, because I always want to make that difference, because it is true. Conflict is not the spirit of contention. The spirit of contention is the spirit of disdain or hostility towards others. And I agree at 100%. Conflict is just having opposing views or values. 100% agree. Well said. People need to understand this. I try my best, and I'm not perfect at it, but I try my best to oppose ideas, not people. And because I want to avoid that spirit of disdain or hostility towards others, I view others as my brothers and sisters. And I hope that I can do my best to avoid the spirit of contention while contending for the faith. All right. Deseret Primrose, you gave Mike Lee the benefit of the doubt about his violent rhetoric, but did not extend the same grace to the people on the left. I actually literally said if someone on the left had done the exact same thing that he did and took down their tweet, I would talk with them, and that I would also, if he didn't regret what he said in any way, I would not support him in any way. So no, I'm not in the, no politician has me just 100% in their camp, no matter what they do. The only person who I've given my heart to is Christ and my wife. So
I was going to jump in if you didn't say that.
Give
you an assist.
Yeah. All right. All right. Last one here. Mudhead Hobbies mini games. That's a long name. R.I.P. Charlie, the great man of faith. Love y'all's content, Luke and Jacob. Will the GAs address the events that transpired at UVU in October General Conference? Truly inspired that President Nelson spoke about peacemaking in the past few years. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, the curious thing actually is, I kind of scanned through General Conference in October 2001 after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and it wasn't even really brought up too much, but you could kind of get the sense of there was an increased focus on certain aspects of the gospel, that peace, assurance, help through trials. So, and that's actually kind of what happened in testimony meeting today, is people were very clearly talking about the event, but it was more about the gospel application of the event. And America is only one part of the world. And I think the general authorities want to give messages that will not just speak to the student who was in the front row seat in Orem, Utah, and is deeply affected by this, but also the person in West Africa that has no idea what the heck even happened in their messages at General Conference.
And I guess I'll put it this way. The brethren and the apostles of Jesus Christ are not social commentators. Their job is to direct people in the spiritual battle in this world by pointing them to Jesus Christ and the principles of his gospel. So when you want them to be social commentators, that's where I think they go wrong. And so what I believe that they do and what they should do and what your ward did, and I think that is a good thing, is that what we do is we go back and we discuss the principles of the gospel at play. We reinforce the gospel principles that would have prevented this and that help us to know how to react properly to it. That's what the gospel is about. It's not about the specific political programs. It's about the principles. And that's what I go to church for. Now, hopefully we as people can understand how the application of those principles should apply, like not having abortion on demand and like basically using the government to protect innocent life. You know what I mean? Like those are good things. But it's hard. We a lot of times again want them to be something that they're not, but you do have to step back and say, look, the principles that they have been teaching and teaching recently are the very principles that are at play in this situation. And I hope we can sort of recognize the game that they're playing and apply that in our lives so that we can sort of have that right algorithm so that we can know how to act and behave, not just in a specific situation, but in all situations. Because like you said, it isn't just that the church is global. It's that the church is universal throughout all of time and eternity. Like that's the real thing, cross culture, time, everything. And so it's not going to be like, hey, here's the political event of the day that we're talking about. If you want that, you can go to like any Protestant church, or like you can go to the, you know, the ones that are all, that's like literally all they are, like social activist organizations. But I'm glad I'm not part of a church that's a social activist organization in the traditional sense. It's in a spiritual activist organization to transform individual human lives, starting with me, not society, teaching me what things I need to put into my heart to transform me first, and then to share those things so that others can transform themselves through Christ and his grace. And that is sort of the thing at the heart of all of this. So,
and on a procedural level, most of the 70s talks are probably already done and submitted. So yeah, the conspiracy theory thing again, don't read in too much into them not mentioning it at General Conference when there's other explanations available.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts, Luke?
Man, I've been talking so much about this and I still feel like I have things to say, but that's good because I think this should be an ongoing conversation that we have in our country, because we do want lasting change to come out of events from this, even if it's just in your personal life, you know?
Absolutely.
I'm glad that the shooter was caught alive because that means we're going to have a trial. And so in 8 months, 12 months, 14 months, whenever this trial happens, it will be kind of a check-in for the country of, remember the thing that happened in September of 2025? How have we been doing since then? So there's a silver lining to it in that sense of how this went down, of him being caught, that I hope we can look back when that trial comes up and this event comes back into the national conversation again, the news cycle again, and at the very least say that in our personal lives we made changes that we were happy about because of this tragedy.
Absolutely. And to all you out there that are still sort of processing this event, as so many of us are, remember you witnessed the murder of someone that you knew, in a sense, like maybe not personally, but they were someone that you knew their personality, you've seen them with their family. Like, so I want to say, hey, if this is shaking you a little bit, like it's okay. You're not anything less or a weirdo because someone you knew got murdered and you watched it. But also I hope that we can remember Charlie as someone who believed in the power of conversation, and that you can engage in good conversations, even with those that you disagree with, or participate as an observer, as many people do in these channels and in the chat groups and in these kinds of things, always with the idea that more speech is better. So we can live in the world of the battlefield of ideas instead of the battlefield of human blood. And I hope that this upcoming movie that's coming out from Angel Studios on Helmuth Hubner in October, I hope you guys all can go and watch that as well. I think that it's a great story that's a parallel to this, to the power of young people who believe in principles and are willing to confront the lies that are being told in society, and how that can really make a change. I mean, Charlie made a big change in this country through the work that he did, and it was specifically focusing on young people. There are other people that are competing for young minds, and if you are not part of the force in your own local ward, stake, whatever your callings are with the youth, and helping to combat these ideologies that are false by helping people to understand the gospel of Jesus Christ and its true teachings, and why those exist, that's your chance to be part of the battle, and not only in the battle of ideas, but also in the battle, the spiritual battle, the vibes, the loving thing that you do for one of those young people to make a difference in their life, to let them know that they have a friend in you, and as someone with a testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and you don't know who you can affect and what a difference it can make. So I hope we all come away with this with a stronger resolve for making peace instead of just being harmless, and with a desire to be better disciples of Christ. So I think that's about it. All right, everybody. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and we'll catch you all in the next one.